The Brutally Delicious Podcast. The Brutally Delicious Podcast. The Brutally Delicious Podcast. The Brutally Delicious Podcast.
This is 70,000 Tons of Metal, the original but world's biggest heavy metal cruise. 60 bands, 4 days, 1 cruise ship, only 3,000 tickets. It's like having an all-access backstage pass. January 29th to February 2nd, 2026. From Miami, Florida to Nassau, the Bahamas, and back. Go to 70,000tons.com and book now.
So let's talk about Dark Angel. Extinction Level Event's out, about a week now?
Yes.
What's been the response to it so far?
Well, so far people seem to be digging it. I mean, that's all we ever wanted. It's available on reverserecords.com right at the moment, and we've been trying to get everybody to get our version of it before we ever send it to like a streaming service or anything like that, just because, Spotify doesn't sound good,
So it's not available anywhere. I mean, except through you guys.
Through us.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, through us only. So you got to go to reverserecords.com to grab it. And at some point, possibly, but right now, I tell you, there's, my management has been guiding me in the direction of what's been happening with a lot of the streaming services. And a lot of them right at the moment are currently just amending their terms of service, and
right.
It is even worse for the artist. So we're just gonna kind of wait it out a little bit.
Were you concerned that would limit your visibility?
Well, it is what it is, and so we're just trying to think in the long term run at the moment. Right. So for true Dark Angel fans, they'll know to go to Reverse. Right. So the album is selling through Reverse, which is fortunate. So but as long as people get to hear it, that's all I care about. Because we never make a ton of money at this, but just want people to be able to hear it, check it out, hear it in its true form, as well, because we put a lot of work into it, and we produced it in a way that's kind of uncommon these days, just having live playing, real amps, real guitars. There was nobody sitting in front of a station at home in their in their basement with their little Pro Tools. No, we did it all live. Real mics, real performances, nothing gridded or no AI put to.
And I think I have other questions, but I think now that you mentioned that, I think that brings a certain sense of organic and realness to the project too, right? You can sort of tell as a listener, I think, when it's been quantized to shape that.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, God, yeah. Everything is these days, and it just, all I know is that we didn't want to sound sterile or processed, or where everything's just kind of that even playing with not a lot of life to it. There's a ton of life to the production on the new record, so that's really exciting. So we're excited to be able to put that part forward for folks. And I'm not saying we're going to start a trend or anything, because I mean it is very arduous to produce an album the way that we just did. It's a challenge, and we did face our challenges, but
in the end, you feel it was worth it, though.
Absolutely, and our producer Rob Shawcross was very vehement and adamant in sticking to the plan of, because me, I'd crap about it. I'm like, why can't we just do what everybody else does? Just get it out.
Right.
This is ball crushing. But in the end, he's correct, and the production came out killer. Love the album, man. It's just there's a lot of just great vibes around the actual. The sonicness of it, the tones and the sound. So, check it out from ours, the way we want you to hear it, reverserecords.com, and we're excited about the songs, the production, the music, the lyrics, the vocals, the artwork, the leads, the drums. Everything came out really killer on it. So we're really excited.
So let's go to what I had prepped then. So after more than 3 decades, what was the spark that convinced you guys to return to full album tour rather than simply leaning on legacy shows like most of your contemporaries do?
That there is a ceiling and a limit to it, to doing that. It's like if you want to, there's nothing wrong with doing the legacy sort of nostalgia act. I've never been a fan of that word, but you can do that, but that I would imagine that market will end up drying up, and we just figured that in order to be able to keep playing shows, going on tours, doing, being a viable act would be let's put out a record, and it is a very organic process to have the album out. Like I know that I've mentioned this many times, a decade or so, maybe even longer. I mentioned in one interview somewhere that when we had a little bit of new material coming at us, Jim had a new song, which eventually became the title track. And I had a number of ideas at the time, and I just blurted out during an interview, "Hey, Dark Angel's gonna have a new record sooner than later. We're working on new material right now." And I've said it many times. What I should have said was nothing.
Right.
Got it all taken care of, got it all done, just quietly, and
Here it is.
But I blew that, so it's my fault. I sometimes don't have a filter. That is very true. So, but hey, we're here now. We got the album out, and so everybody go check that thing out. I tell you.
Okay. How did working with, you mentioned Robert Shallcross and Mike Frazier, how did that influence the final sound of Extinction Level Events compared to your early classic releases?
Right. Well, Rob is well familiar with our early material, and Dark Angel, up until Time Does Not Heal, has never been accused of having a great sounding album. We have a rock that was real solid. Bill Metoyer did a great job at that one, but that thing was just a demo that ended up getting pressed to vinyl. And I wasn't in the band at the time, but I was hanging around the guys at the time. And then on the next album, Darkness Ascends, Randy Burns captured a magic with it, but like Randy will say, he's like, I'm pretty good at getting getting drum tones, guitar tones at that time in my production life was not my strong point. I'm like, that's valid. Great drum sound,
Right.
Real big. There was no budget to that album either. And Leave Scars was the reason that came out the way it was. We had Michael Monarch being our producer, and Michael Monarch was brought into the project because he was the guitarist in Steppenwolf.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And he did, the actual, all the, Born to Be Wild and Magic Carpet Ride, Pusher Man. He was a guitarist for all of that. And our management at the time said, Steppenwolf was a heavy band, so he knows how to get a guitar tone. And we were like, wait, what? And it was no fault of Michael's that the album came out, Leave Scars came out sounding as weird as it did. We'll take the blame for that. Michael tried to steer us in the proper direction. We were just some young punk kids that said, no, we know what we're doing. We've been in the studio 2 times before this,
Right. Veterans.
Yeah, we're vets. Yeah, definitely. So, and that's why we ended up going with Terry Dave for Time Does Not Heal, and that was our most cohesive sounding album, And, so with this album, Rob was a big shaper of the sound, and there were times when I would give pushback, like, are we sure, and he's like, just shut up, Hoglan. Trust me, I know what I'm doing, just shut up. And we've worked with Mike Frazier before. We worked with Fraze on Strapping's The New Black, and he's the old Vancouver guy, and that's where we tracked the record, was up at the Armory in Vancouver, worked out of that studio many times. Tons of Strapping records and all sorts of albums that I've worked on and tracked there, and that's also a really, world famous studio, a whole lot of huge records that everybody knows, legendary albums have been cut there. So we just tried to put the elements in place to where we had, the solid foundation for what's going to create a good sounding album. And even after Phrase was done mixing it, and I'm giving Rob a lot of pushback, he's pushing back at me just with the kind of like, dude, shut up. But I'm like, just had to examine other mixes, had to examine other approaches.
Right.
Just
what does that feel like, though? How do you you've got a ton of experience, right? And you've done 8 million things. How do you put that aside and let, Rob take over?
Because there are many elements of this business or whatever, this just
thing,
playing music,
right,
that I have to defer to somebody else's wisdom, expertise,
after all, that's what you hired him for, but I'm just curious if it's tough because, you've got your certain way of doing things after so many years.
Absolutely, and so that's why, I trust Rob implicitly, so I did have to put a lot of faith, because I'm like, I'm not sure, and that's where he's like, just let me take this, let me run with this, I know what I'm doing, let me, just, the ball is in my court, let me handle it, and just, you did what you needed to do on the creative side, and the band did what they needed to do with all the performances and all the creative stuff, so let me just shape it from here. And he was a huge shaper with it, and, Mike Fraser mixes in a very, very old school way, you go into the studio. It's not like he's just sitting around his house with, he's got some speakers up and he's working on his little DAW at home.
Right.
That is not how it worked. And so when we went in for a couple of recall mixes, we got to do a couple, that's par for the course. A lot of times he would just call up your mixer, your engineer, whoever it was, and say, hey man, we need a little higher guitar. Okay, let me just get on the Pro Tools real quick. Okay, it's a file in your Dropbox now, what you're looking for. No, we had to physically go back into the studio, remix a couple of the songs, and
fade her up,
all that kind of stuff. So yeah, man. So it was well worth it. It's an arduous process, but
do you
worth
think
it.
that sort of I don't want to say archaic, but that sort of recording process, the analog process, or whatever it is, sort of added to the? You guys are back from that era as well. Do you think that added more to the authenticity or organic quality of the record? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would imagine it has no choice but to add to it, because you've got a band that we've never done it any other way. So, I've done plenty, but Eric, who has done some tracking, and Laura, who knows Pro Tools very well, she's had to track herself for a number of projects throughout the years, and she knows Pro Tools, I don't. And so adding that, returning to that element of production it's the only way anybody's ever heard Dark Angel before, so it's, at least we have that going. And for, I don't know if people think we sound polished or processed.
It could have been even jarring to like old school fans, right? To hear the difference from, that whole analog sort of thing to the digital processed quantized bullshit.
And there's, who knows about the future, but at least for this one, and that's one thing that Rob was very adamant about. He's like, at least for this one, let's do it in the way that Dark Angel is used to doing it, and your fans this won't be jarring for them. It's going to be like, okay, yeah, it's like a nice little warm pillow or something, a warm blanket of mutilation and mayhem. So.
Okay. Let's see. With a lineup combining classic members and new blood like Laura, like you just mentioned, how does the band balance honoring your legacy while evolving the sound for today's thrash scene?
This is minus one person, Laura Christine, hand chosen by Jim Durkin. This is the same lineup that we have had since the late 80s, so, that's a lot of a lot of people are kind of surprised when they see us live, and like Ron even says, "Hey man, we're the same cats that we were back then." And people are like, "Wait a minute," like there's a lot less hair in some places,
Right.
a lot more hair in other places.
Right.
So, so that is something that is, I don't know if it's commendable or not, but hey, we're able to keep ourselves enough alive and together to be able to hit the road, at this point. And, Lara's addition to the band has, I think I can speak for the other guys in the band that she's elevated us to such a degree. She's a great player. She's an amazing personality. She's just really awesome. These are like her big brothers, and these guys, everybody loves her. And, for me, since, I've mentioned this before, her placement within the band, her placing into the band, I had zero to do with it. I didn't even know it was happening. Jim decided for himself that Lara was his favorite guitarist, and he wanted her to replace him because he knew that there was going to be times coming up when it was his availability was going to be drastically diminished. And so he went to the guys in the band and let them choose. They all took the vote themselves. It was presented to me afterwards, so I'm like, hey, at least I didn't have to go, give Laura a shot.
Right.
I didn't have to do any of that. So I got clear conscience with all of that, so that's pretty good. But she's leveled up the intensity of us live. She's a headbanging fool.
Right.
So that's killer. And everybody else in the band, bangs to their health's degree that they can.
Right.
So so that's where we're in a really amazing spot right now. Our shows are full of energy, and that is one thing I think people are seeing, that like, wow, I've had friends text me going, thanks for having us out the show, thanks for playing last night, and you guys really brought it. I wasn't sure what to expect, and
right.
a lot of your peers definitely are not bringing it the way you guys are. So
how do you keep up with that? Because you play pretty aggressively.
Right. This is all I've ever done. So this isn't a big, it's not like a ramping up of, I've only played in a classic rock band for the last 20 years,
right.
And now I got to go back to my teenage band and play brutal stuff. None of that. This is all I've ever done. So this is the only thing I have ever done is play intense.
And I guess you stay fairly busy, right? Because you're in like 8 million. Like 8 million things you pop up.
I have not had many days off over the last 40 years, so especially
by design, though, right?
Absolutely, yeah. That's why I've said this a million times. It's like when the schedule gets crazy, because we just came from a tour right into this one, and I was doing stuff before those tours, and then we came into this tour directly after this tour. We have the Death to All tour, which is it's not long after we finished this one, a couple weeks at most. And every time I've said this, that anytime the schedule gets really nuts to butts and pushed up against each other, I always got to just stop and remind myself, dude, you asked for this. You asked for this. You when you were a kid, when you were 13 years old, and you said, this is what I want to do. You asked for this, so don't complain.
Right.
You got what you want.
And you get to live it, because for every one of you, there's thousands and thousands that never get to the east of the spot you're at, right?
Fair enough. So I'm doing it for all of us. All you guys never got to do it. But yeah, and I'm in a very fortunate position, and I've always said that I get what I want. I'm good at willing and also creating, what my life. So I've gotten exactly what I have asked for. So, and get to be on, nice little tour bus, be on tour constantly, and that's all I ever wanted to do when I was a kid. So, this is my only life I've ever known. I've been on tour since I was 16, So there you go.